The desert doesn't listen to screams. It absorbs them. The vast, indifferent expanse of sun-bleached stone and endless sky swallows sound whole, leaving only the ringing silence of absolute isolation.
Mom, I'm scared.
This is where we find her, not at the beginning of her story, but at its breaking point. Her name is Hagar. And at this moment, she is utterly lost. She stumbles, her sandals long since shredded by the jagged rocks. Her throat is a raw, closed channel of dust and thirst. In her arms, the weight is becoming unbearable. Not the physical weight of the boy, he is too thin, too light for his years, but the terrifying, crushing weight of his stillness. Ishmael. Her son. His breath comes in shallow, ragged hitches. His dark eyes, once bright with wild, playful energy, are now dull, fixed on a point beyond the shimmering heat haze. He hasn't cried in hours. That is the worst sound of all, his silence. She can't carry him any further. Her own legs buckle, not from surrender, but from a final, biological failure. She lays him down as gently as she can in the meager patch of shade offered by a brittle, thorny bush. It is a cruel mockery of shelter. He doesn't moan. He doesn't reach for her. And that's when the dam inside Hagar breaks. The scream that the desert has been waiting for finally comes. But it doesn't tear from her throat as a roar of anguish. It escapes as a whisper, a shattered prayer aimed at nothing and everything. Do not let me look on the death of the child. She doesn't call him by his name. To name him would be to make this real. He is just the child. Her child. The promise. The boy who laughed, who ran, who was her entire world. Now, he is a dying thing under a thorn bush, and she is a woman about to watch the light leave his eyes. She turns away. She cannot bear the sight. She stumbles a few more paces and collapses, her own body racked with sobs so deep they make no sound. She puts distance between herself and the dying, a final, futile act of a heart that cannot hold this pain. She lifts her own face to the blinding, pitiless sun and weeps, this is the end. Every path has led here. Every choice, every harsh word, every moment of pride and desperation, has funneled into this single, desolate point in the wilderness of Beersheba. The grand promises. A cruel joke. The future of a great nation. Ashes on the wind. All that remains is the heat, the thirst, the silence, and the slow, inevitable approach of a death she is powerless to stop. This is the story of Hagar. But it is not a story that begins with despair. It begins in a wealthy, sophisticated household, in the heart of a divine promise so massive it strained the walls of the tent that held it. It is a story of tangled motives, human plans crashing into God's purposes, and the breathtaking truth that in the exact moment you are certain you are most forgotten, you are, in fact, most seen. This is the story of the first person in all of human history to give God a name. To understand Hagar's scream, we must go back. Decades back. To a man named Abram and his wife Sarai. They lived in the magnificent, pagan city of Ur, then Haran. They were wealthy, respected, and utterly trapped by a single, haunting emptiness. They had no child. In their world, this was more than a personal sorrow, it was a social curse, a dead end. Your legacy, your name, your very identity, it all flowed through a son. Then God spoke. He called Abram to leave everything. To go to a land he would show him. And he made a promise so audacious it defied biology and reason, I will make you into a great nation. I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth. Abram went. He believed. The promise became the air he breathed, the treasure he guarded. But the years passed. The dust of the earth remained just dust. Sarai's body remained a closed womb. The promise began to feel like a weight, a taunt. They grew old in the land of the promise, but the promise itself seemed to grow younger, slipping further from their grasp with each passing season. The tension in their tent was a living thing. Sarai, the princess, for that is what her name meant, lived under the shadow of the one thing her status, her beauty, her wealth could not buy. She watched her husband, the friend of God, grow into a revered sheik, while she remained barren. The divine guarantee seemed to flow to him, but not through her. The cultural shame was hers to bear alone. It is into this pressurized, hope-deferred atmosphere that a young woman enters the story. She is from Egypt. A maidservant. Her name is Hagar. We know nothing of how she came to be there. Was she part of the spoils Pharaoh gave Abram during their disastrous sojourn in Egypt? Was she purchased? We don't know. She is, in the text, property. A living asset in a wealthy household. She is young, likely strong, and utterly without agency. Her life is not her own. And then, Sarai has an idea. It is a plan born of equal parts desperation, cultural permission, and a profound weariness with waiting on God. It is, by all contemporary standards, a perfectly legal, logical solution. She goes to Abram, her words heavy with resignation and strategy. The Lord has kept me from having children. Go, sleep with my slave, perhaps I can build a family through her. Perhaps. That word holds a universe of hope and disaster. Ancient law codes, like the Code of Hammurabi, spelled this practice out clearly. If a wife was barren, she could give her maidservant to her husband. The child born from that union would be legally considered the wife's child. The servant was a vessel, a surrogate womb. It was a human workaround for a divine delay. Abram, the great man of faith, listens. And he agrees. The text is stark in its simplicity. Abram agreed to what Sarai said. After a decade of waiting in the land of Canaan, he assents to a plan concocted in Egypt. The promise, it seems, will be achieved through culturally sanctioned expediency. So, Hagar is brought to Abram's tent. There is no record of her consent, because in that world, it wasn't required. She is doing her duty, fulfilling her role as property. But something profound and dangerous happens in that transaction. In the most intimate act, Hagar is used as a tool, a means to an end. And when the purpose of a person is reduced to utility, the soul rebels. The plan succeeds. Hagar conceives. Immediately, the fragile dynamics of the household shatter. For Sarai, this should have been the moment of vindication. Her plan worked. Her servant was carrying her child. The social shame was being lifted. But instead of joy, a more toxic emotion rises in her, contempt. The Hebrew word implies a deep, dehumanizing disdain. The vessel has become a person. The tool has developed a will. Hagar, the Egyptian slave girl, is now carrying the air. And Hagar knows it. The text gives us a single, devastating sentence to describe the shift. When she knew she was pregnant, she began to despise her mistress. Sarai's contempt is met with Hagar's disdain. Why? Perhaps Hagar looked at Sarai's empty womb and her own swelling belly and felt a surge of power she had never known. I am doing what you cannot do. I am carrying the future that you could not produce. In a world where a woman's value was tied to fertility, Hagar, the slave, had suddenly outranked the princess. The societal tables had turned in the most fundamental way, and Hagar's posture reflected it. She may have become insolent, withdrawn, or simply carried herself with the unassailable confidence of a woman fulfilling the prime directive of their culture. For Sarai, this was an unbearable inversion. She goes to Abram, her words scalding with blame. You are responsible for the wrong I am suffering. I put my slave in your arms, and now that she knows she is pregnant, she despises me. May the Lord judge between you and me. Notice the shift. The plan was hers. The suggestion was hers. But the consequence, the human consequence of using a person, is now his fault. May the Lord judge between you and me. She drags God into the middle of her domestic conflict, positioning herself as the wronged party. Abram, caught in the crossfire, responds with a stunning abdication of leadership and humanity. Your slave is in your hands. Do with her whatever you think best. With that sentence, he gives Hagar back to Sarai. He returns the pregnant woman to the absolute power of the woman who now hates her. He treats Hagar not as the mother of his unborn child, but as a disciplinary problem to be handled. He washes his hands of the mess his own compliance created. And Sarai, empowered by this permission, mistreated her. The word is strong. It implies oppression, humiliation, harsh treatment. Perhaps verbal abuse, physical hardship, relentless degradation. Sarai makes Hagar's life so bitter, so unbearable, that the pregnant slave sees only one option: flight. So Hagar runs. She, an Egyptian woman, pregnant and alone, flees into the unforgiving wilderness that lies between Canaan and her homeland, Egypt. This is an act of incredible desperation and courage. The wilderness is a place of bandits, wild animals, and death by exposure. But in her mind, the certainty of danger out there is preferable to the certainty of torment in Sarai's house. She is fleeing from. But she has no real destination. She is a runaway slave, property in revolt. Where can she go? Exhausted, she collapses by a spring of water along the road to Shur. It is here, in her utter dereliction, homeless, pregnant, hunted, and hopeless, that the impossible happens. The angel of the Lord finds her. Not a mere angel. The angel of the Lord, a mysterious figure in the Old Testament often understood as a pre-incarnate appearance of God himself. He doesn't wait for her to cry out. He finds her. He seeks the one who is lost. Hagar, slave of Sarai, he says, calling her by name and by station, where have you come from, and where are you going? The question is not for his information. It is for her revelation. It forces her to articulate her situation. She answers honestly, with the simplicity of the broken, I'm running away from my mistress Sarai. Then comes the divine command that seems, at first, impossibly cruel: go back to your mistress and submit to her. Go back. To the abuse? To the humiliation? To the woman who has made her life a living hell? This is not the rescue she envisioned. This is not freedom. It is a summons to return to captivity. But the command is not naked. It is clothed in a promise so personal it changes everything. The angel continues, I will increase your descendants so much that they will be too numerous to count. He speaks to her the same language of impossible multitude he spoke to Abram. Then, speaking directly of the child in her womb, you are now pregnant and you will give birth to a son. You shall name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard of your misery. Ishmael. God hears that he gives her a prophetic word about her son. He will be a wild donkey of a man, his hand will be against everyone and everyone's hand against him, and he will live in hostility toward all his brothers. This is not a gentle blessing. It is a hard, clear-eyed prediction of a life of conflict, independence, and struggle. A life, in many ways, mirroring his mother's, forever on the outside, fighting for a place. But for Hagar, in that moment, the prophecy is secondary to the seismic, life-altering reality of the encounter itself. God spoke to her. An Egyptian slave girl. A runaway. A nobody. He sought her. He knew her name. He knew her pain. He had heard her misery long before she cried by this spring. And he had a future for her and the son she carried. The world rearranges itself around this truth. She is not unseen. She is not forgotten. Overwhelmed, she does something no one has ever done before. She gives the Lord a name. She gave this name to the Lord who spoke to her, "You are the God who sees me," for she said, "I have now seen the one who sees me." El Roi. The God who sees. This is revolutionary theology born in desert dust. It is not the God of the mighty patriarchs, the God of promises and covenants, though he is that. To Hagar, he reveals himself as the God who sees the individual in their pain. The God whose gaze finds you in the wilderness of your shame, your abuse, your running. The God who sees the slave, the outcast, the used, the discarded. The well where this happened she names Bir Lahai Roi, well of the living one who sees me. It becomes a personal monument to a personal God. And Hagar, armed with this identity-shattering encounter, obeys. She goes back. She returns to the house of Abram, to the harshness of Sarai. But she goes back a different woman. She is no longer just Hagar the Egyptian slave. She is Hagar, the one whom El Roi sees. She carries Ishmael, God hears, in her womb. She lives now with a secret, unassailable knowledge. Her story is known to God. 13 years pass. Ishmael is born. Abram is 86 years old, finally a father. The laughter in the tent is real. Ishmael grows, a strong, wild boy, the apple of his father's eye. For Hagar, these are years of quiet endurance. She is back in her role, but the memory of the well and the name El Roi is a hidden spring in her own soul. Then, the unthinkable happens. God appears again to Abram, now 99, and changes his name to Abraham, father of many nations. He changes Sarai's name to Sarah, princess. And he reiterates his covenant, Sarah herself will bear a son. She will be the mother of nations. Abraham falls face down and laughs. Will a son be born to a man 100 years old? Will Sarah bear a child at the age of 90? His laughter is one of joyful, bewildered disbelief. Then, thinking of his beloved firstborn, he pleads. If only Ishmael might live under your blessing. God is firm. Yes, but your wife Sarah will bear you a son, and you will call him Isaac. My covenant I will establish with Isaac. But in his mercy, he does bless Ishmael. As for Ishmael, I have heard you. I will make him fruitful and will greatly increase his numbers, and I will make him into a great nation. 2 boys. 2 destinies. One born of human expediency and fleshly effort, Ishmael. One to be born of divine promise and supernatural intervention, Isaac. The tension in the tent, which had been dormant, is now codified by God himself. A year later, the promise is fulfilled. Sarah, at 90, conceives and gives birth to Isaac, whose name means, he laughs. Now the laughter in the camp has a different source. It is the laughter of miracle, of a closed womb opened by God himself. At Isaac's weaning ceremony, a great feast is thrown. It is a celebration of the covenant child, the son of the promise. But during the festivities, Sarah sees something. She sees Ishmael, the teenager, mocking or playing with Isaac. The Hebrew word is ambiguous. It could be harmless teenage teasing, or it could carry a darker, more derisive tone. Given the charged history, Sarah interprets it in the worst possible light. And she has had enough. She goes to Abraham, her words a final, ultimatum, get rid of that slave woman and her son, for that woman's son will never share in the inheritance with my son Isaac. The language is dehumanizing. That slave woman. That woman's son. Ishmael is not named. He is disinherited, disowned. Sarah, now the mother of the promised heir, will tolerate no rival, no shadow over her son's future. She wants the living reminder of her own failed plan, her shame, her jealousy, erased. The text says this distressed Abraham greatly. Ishmael is his son. He loves him. For 13 years, Ishmael was the promise fulfilled in his eyes. This is an agony for him. But God speaks to Abraham, resolving his conflict in a way that must have shattered his heart. Do not be so distressed about the boy and your slave woman. Listen to whatever Sarah tells you, because it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. I will make the son of the slave into a nation also, because he is your offspring. God affirms Sarah's harsh demand. The covenant line must be unambiguous. It will flow through Isaac. But God, remembering his promise to Hagar, reassures Abraham about Ishmael. He will not be abandoned. So, early the next morning, Abraham gets up. He takes some bread and a skin of water. He gives them to Hagar. He places them on her shoulders. And then he sends her away, with her son. Imagine the scene. No fanfare. No caravan. No provision for a long journey. Just a piece of bread, a container of water, and a dismissal. The wealth of Abraham, the father who loved him, provides almost nothing for the boy's exile. It is an act of stunning, painful austerity. Hagar is cast out. Again. This time, not by the cruelty of a mistress, but by the decree of a patriarch and the sobering clarity of God's own plan. This time, she is not alone. She has her son, the one she fought for, lived for. But she is being sent into the void with the barest means of survival. She leaves. She wanders in the desert of Beersheba. And the inevitable happens. The water in the skin is used up. This is where we came in. The water is gone. The desert is winning. Hagar places Ishmael under the bush. She cannot bear to watch him die. She turns away and weeps. The God who sees seems to have closed his eyes. The promise of a great nation for Ishmael feels like the cruelest kind of mirage, evaporating in the desert heat, but then, a sound cuts through her sobs. Not her own. The sound of a child's voice. Ishmael is crying. The Bible says, God heard the boy crying. Not Hagar's weeping, though he heard that too. He heard the cry of the boy. The angel of God calls to Hagar from heaven, "What is the matter, Hagar? Do not be afraid, God has heard the boy crying as he lies there. Lift the boy up and take him by the hand, for I will make him into a great nation." El Roi is also the God who hears, El Shammah. The name she was given to bestow on her son is now being vindicated in the most desperate moment. Ishmael, God hears. Then God opens her eyes. He doesn't create a new well. He reveals what has been there all along, hidden in plain sight. She sees a well of water. She goes, fills the skin, and gives the boy a drink. The God who sees provides by opening blind eyes to existing grace. The story concludes, God was with the boy as he grew up. He lived in the desert and became an archer, and his mother got a wife for him from Egypt. Hagar, the Egyptian slave, survives. Ishmael, the wild donkey of a man, thrives under God's presence. He becomes the father of 12 tribal rulers, just as God promised. A great nation indeed springs from this rejected, heard, and seen son. Hagar's story is not a side note. It is a masterclass in the ways of God with the wounded, the overlooked, and the collateral damage of other people's faith journeys. 1. God sees the person behind the utility. To Abram and Sarai, Hagar was a means to an end, a womb, a solution. To God, she was Hagar. A person with a name, a story, and dignity. In a world that reduces people to their function, God sees the individual. You are never just an employee, a parent, a patient, a statistic. You are a person seen by Elroy. 2. Our detours are not dead ends to God. Ishmael was the product of a faithless, human plan. A mistake. A plan B gone wrong. Yet God wove him into his sovereign story. He blessed what he did not originate. Your past failures, your rash decisions, the messy consequences of your lack of faith, they are not beyond the redemptive reach of the God who can bring purpose out of even our worst compromises. 3. God often meets us in the wilderness, not the palace. Hagar met God not in the wealthy tents of Abraham, but in the desert of her running and her desperation. Our wilderness seasons, of loss, failure, loneliness, and brokenness, are not signs of his absence. They are often the very classrooms where he reveals himself most personally as the God who sees. The well is in the wasteland. For, obedience to God can mean returning to a painful place. God's command to Hagar was not freedom from Sarai, but a call to return and submit to Sarai. Sometimes, God's path to our promise leads directly back through the pain we tried to escape, a difficult relationship, a challenging job, a season of waiting. He calls us to faithfulness in the hard place, trusting that his presence there is our true deliverance. 5. God hears the cry of the forgotten. God heard Ishmael's cry when the water was gone. He hears the cry of the child, the oppressed, the one at the end of all resources. Your cry, when you have no eloquent prayer left, when it's just a whimper of despair, reaches his ears. You are never unheard. 6. Your pain can give you a unique name for God. Hagar is the first person in Scripture to name God. She didn't call him God Almighty, El Shaddai, as Abraham did. She called him the God who sees me. Your deepest pain, when encountered by his grace, can become the place where you discover a new dimension of his character. Your testimony becomes a new name for his faithfulness to others who are hurting. The story doesn't end in the desert. Centuries later, a prophet named Isaiah would speak words of comfort to a people in exile. And he would say this, "Give ear and come to me, listen, that you may live. Surely you will summon nations you know not, and nations you do not know will come running to you, for the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel, has endowed you with splendor." And who does the New Testament reveal as the ultimate fulfillment of a promise to Abraham, the true Son, through whom all nations are blessed? Jesus Christ. And in a stunning act of divine irony and grace, who is one of the very first groups to come and worship this Jewish Messiah shortly after his birth? Matthew's Gospel tells us, Magi from the East. Scholars have long associated these wise men with the descendants of the tribes that sprang from Abraham's other son, the sons of Ishmael, dwelling in the deserts to the east. The ones cast out. The ones God saw and heard. From the line of Hagar and Ishmael, representatives come seeking the King of the Jews. They kneel before the ultimate Isaac, the son of the promise. The God who sees Hagar is the God who, in Christ, draws all people, Jew and Gentile, slave and free, Isaac and Ishmael, to himself. The wilderness cry finds its answer at the foot of a cross. The well of living water is open to all who thirst. Hagar's story is, in the end, our story. It is the assurance that in your most desolate moment, under your own thorn bush, when you are certain you are invisible and your cry is lost to the wind, you are seen. You are heard. You are known. By Elroy. The God who sees you. Ensure you like and subscribe to my channel to keep getting Bible stories like this.